The low thrum of treadmills and the sharp clang of weights dropping onto rubber mats filled the air inside Apex Fitness, a steady heartbeat of determination that pulsed through the bright, sun-drenched gym. Members hustled through their routines, faces flushed with effort, bodies bent to the pursuit of transformation. Amid the flurry of motion, Sophie Reyes moved like a quiet current, her presence calm, unwavering, a thread of steady encouragement woven into the chaos. Her soft voice lifted above the noise, a gentle affirmation here, a quiet correction there, never harsh, never distant. She bent to adjust a lifter's form with a light touch, offered a high five to a struggling runner who managed one more sprint, and beamed with authentic pride at every small triumph she witnessed. Behind a wall of mirrored glass near the manager's office, Daniel Grant watched silently, arms folded across his chest, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Disguised today in casual clothes, a ball cap tugged low to obscure his face, Daniel wasn't here to inspect the books or quiz the sales team. He had come undercover for something far harder to measure: a heartbeat, a pulse, the quiet proof that Apex Fitness was still more than a business. He studied his trainers one by one, noting their style, their energy, their interactions. But it was Sophie who held his attention without even trying. He watched as she knelt to tie the shoelace of an elderly man shuffling uncertainly between machines, laughing with him as if they were old friends. He noticed the way her eyes softened when a nervous beginner fumbled through a squat, how she clapped with real delight when they got it right on the next try. Sophie Reyes didn't just train bodies. She lifted spirits, patched together broken confidence with the threadbare tools of patience and belief. Daniel felt a flicker of something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. He had built Apex Fitness from the ground up with the dream of creating more than just a gym. He wanted a sanctuary where strength wasn't measured by pounds lifted, but by battles fought and won in the quiet spaces inside. Watching Sophie work, Daniel wondered if maybe, just maybe, that dream was still alive. He leaned back against the glass, a small, knowing smile ghosting across his lips, unaware that the day unfolding before him would lead to something far bigger than he had ever planned, something he could never have orchestrated, even if he tried. The glass doors of Apex Fitness slid open with a soft hiss, and 17-year-old Jason Miller stepped inside, his gym bag pressed tightly against his chest like a shield. He stood there, frozen for a moment, his tall frame awkwardly hunched as if trying to shrink himself smaller, invisible. His hood was tugged low over his face, his gaze glued to the floor, tracing invisible patterns on the tiles. The buzz of laughter and the rhythmic pounding of feet on treadmills washed over him, and Jason felt the familiar sting of isolation tighten in his chest. Every chuckle, every passing glance twisted into imagined mockery, ghosts of the bullying he endured at school clinging to him like a second skin. He didn't belong here, he was sure of it, and the urge to turn and bolt almost overwhelmed him. But before he could retreat, a soft voice cut through the noise, gentle and welcoming. "Hey there," Sophie Reyes said, her tone easy, casual, as if greeting an old friend rather than a terrified stranger. Jason's head snapped up instinctively, his wary eyes meeting hers for just a second before darting away. Sophie noticed everything: the tight grip on his bag, the defensive posture, the way he flinched at every sound. She read the signs as clearly as if he had written them on a poster, recognizing the raw nerves, the heavy fear of not being enough, of not being wanted. She took a step closer, keeping her movements slow, non-threatening, a warm smile lighting up her face. "First time?" she asked lightly, her voice laced with encouragement rather than judgment. Jason nodded stiffly, his throat too tight to speak. "You're in the right place," Sophie continued, her eyes kind, her energy calm. "Everyone starts somewhere. We're just glad you're here." Jason blinked, caught off guard by the genuine kindness in her voice, a sound so foreign to his battered heart that it left him momentarily disarmed. No sarcasm, no laughter hidden behind polite words, just simple human warmth. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he lowered his bag, his shoulders easing a fraction, the heavy armor around him cracking just slightly. Sophie grinned wider, sensing the shift, and motioned for him to follow her. Come on, she said, her tone light, inviting. Let's get you started. And just like that, with nothing more than a smile and a few gentle words, Sophie Reyes reached across the chasm that Jason had wrapped himself in and pulled him a little closer to the light, planting the first fragile seed of belonging inside a heart that had almost forgotten what it felt like to hope. Daniel Grant drifted closer, pretending to inspect the rows of dumbbells, his hand brushing absently over cold iron as he stole glances toward the scene unfolding near the stretching mats. His trained eyes, so used to sizing up form and technique, now focused intently on something far less visible, the quiet unraveling of walls around a boy who looked like he was used to hiding behind them. Jason Miller stood stiffly before Sophie Reyes, his gym bag forgotten at his feet, hands twisting nervously at the hem of his worn sweatshirt. Daniel watched as Sophie crouched low, resting on her heels so she could meet Jason's averted gaze without towering over him, her body language open and inviting. Jason hesitated, shifting from foot to foot, a storm of emotions playing across his face, but Sophie waited patiently, her silence louder than any words, offering a space safe enough for Jason's trembling voice to finally find its way out. I don't belong here, Jason muttered thickly, the words barely a whisper, like they hurt to say. I'm not like them. They laugh at school. His voice cracked and fell away, shame curling his shoulders inward. Daniel felt a sharp, unexpected ache pierce his chest, the rawness of Jason's confession slicing through the usual noise of the gym. Sophie leaned in closer, her expression fierce in its tenderness. She didn't dismiss his pain, didn't rush to reassure with empty platitudes. Instead, she let the heaviness hang between them for a moment before spouting, her voice steady and sure. Strength, she said, her dark eyes locked on his, isn't about muscles or trophies. It's not about what you look like. It's about choosing to show up when it would be easier to quit. It's about standing here right now, even when it feels impossible. That's real strength, Jason. And it starts inside, where no one else can see. Jason blinked rapidly, as if trying to absorb words that didn't compute with everything he'd been taught to believe about himself. His breathing hitched, but he nodded once, a tiny movement that spoke volumes. Daniel exhaled slowly, realizing he'd been holding his breath without knowing it. He straightened, heart thudding harder than any workout ever could. There, in the small circle of trust Sophie had created with nothing more than patience and fierce compassion, Daniel saw something rare, something precious, a spark that could grow into something unstoppable if only given the chance. And in that quiet, fragile moment, Daniel knew he wasn't just witnessing a training session. He was witnessing the beginning of a transformation that would ripple far beyond these gym walls, one that had already begun. In the days that followed, Daniel Grant made a habit of lingering in the shadows of Apex Fitness, a clipboard in hand or a towel slung over his shoulder, blending easily into the background as he watched Sophie Reyes quietly work her magic. She met Jason Miller every afternoon like clockwork, greeting him with a bright smile that didn't falter, even when Jason's eyes dropped to the floor or his voice cracked with uncertainty. Daniel watched as Sophie tailored every moment to Jason's fragile confidence, never rushing him, never pushing him past the edge of fear. She celebrated his small victories with a kind of unshakable joy, clapping when he added 5 more pounds to his lift, grinning wide when he finished a shaky set of push-ups, treating every tiny achievement like it was the winning goal in a championship game. Jason, hesitant at first, began to shift almost imperceptibly before Daniel's eyes. His posture straightened, his movements lost their halting stiffness, and the wary glance he used to throw over his shoulder slowly gave way to focused determination. His smile, once fleeting and rare, started to surface more often, tentative but achingly real. Sophie made sure Jason never melted into the background, always calling him forward with gentle encouragement, anchoring him in group classes where he might have otherwise slipped away unseen. She shielded him with quiet, deliberate kindness, standing between him and the echoes of old mockery that still haunted him, turning the gym into a place of safety instead of fear. Daniel saw how she adjusted exercises when Jason's doubt crept back in, how she framed every struggle as a stepping stone rather than a failure. In her hands, the gym floor became something sacred, a battleground where invisible wars were fought and won without a single punch thrown. Daniel's chest tightened each time he saw Jason beam with pride over things most people took for granted, things that were monumental victories for a boy who had been taught to feel small. It wasn't just training, Daniel realized. It was healing. It was rebuilding a foundation that had been cracked by cruelty and patched painstakingly with courage and hope. Sophie wasn't just a good trainer. She was something rarer, something infinitely more valuable. She was a protector, a builder of strength that went far beyond muscle. Watching them together, Daniel felt a decision settle deep inside him, heavy and certain. Whatever plans he had for this gym's future, they would have to start and grow with people like Sophie Reyes, because hearts like hers were the strongest force he had ever seen. The colorful flyers went up overnight, plastered across the glass doors and mirrored walls of Apex Fitness, their bold letters announcing Member Appreciation Day in bright, welcoming colors. Daniel Grant walked the floor that morning with an unusual spring in his step, pausing to shake hands and flash easy smiles as he spread word of the upcoming event. The celebration wasn't just about milestones or personal bests. It was about honoring the quiet, hard-fought victories that too often went unseen. At the corner of the stretching area, Sophie Reyes crouched next to Jason Miller, who was tying his shoes, his movements slow and uncertain. She held out a flyer to him with a playful smile, waving it gently until he looked up. "You should come," she said, her voice full of that easy warmth he had come to trust. Jason hesitated, his hand pausing on the knot of his sneaker. His eyes flicked toward the bustling gym floor, where stronger, more confident bodies moved effortlessly through their routines. Doubt clouded his face, creeping in like a tide he couldn't hold back. "I don't know," he muttered, barely audible. "It's not really my thing." Sophie tilted her head, studying him for a moment, then sat down cross-legged beside him, uncaring of the curious glances from passers-by. She lowered her voice, speaking with a sincerity that wrapped around him like a shield. "Jason, you belong here just as much as anyone else. More, even. This isn't about lifting the heaviest weights or running the fastest mile. It's about showing up, about fighting the battles no one else can see." Jason stared at her, the storm behind his eyes raging quietly, warring against every cruel word he had ever been fed about not being enough. Sophie didn't rush him, didn't push harder. She just sat there, patient and steady, the same way she had from the beginning, offering him a bridge back to himself. Slowly, Jason nodded, the motion small but certain, a tremor of courage finding root in the soil she had so carefully tended. "Okay," he whispered, and Sophie's smile widened into something that shone with pride. "Good," she said, standing and offering him a hand. Jason took it, letting her pull him to his feet, the touch grounding him more than he could ever say. Across the gym, Daniel watched the exchange from a distance, a slow smile curving his mouth as he turned away, knowing that something extraordinary was already set in motion, and the best was still yet to come. The energy inside Apex Fitness crackled like electricity, laughter and conversation bouncing off the high ceilings as music thumped in the background. Members mingled near tables piled high with healthy snacks and giveaways. Trainers shared easy conversations with clients, and every corner of the gym seemed to pulse with a celebratory spirit. Jason Miller lingered near the stretching area, his water bottle gripped tightly in both hands, his knuckles white around the plastic. His shoulders were tense, his breathing shallow, his gaze darting across the crowd like a trapped animal searching for an escape. The familiar anxiety gnawed at him, whispering that he didn't belong among the smiling, confident faces, that stepping too far into the room would expose him all over again. But next to him, Sophie Reyes stood steady, offering a soft stream of encouragement with her presence alone. She didn't press him to mingle or fake enthusiasm. She simply stayed, a quiet anchor in the churning sea of Jason's nerves. Jason felt the warmth of her belief bleeding into him, battling the old fear that clung stubbornly to his skin. He took one step closer to the main floor, then another, inching out of the shadows. As the chatter dipped, suddenly Jason's heart leapt into his throat. Daniel Grant had taken the microphone at the front of the gym, his calm voice cutting through the buzz of excitement. "Today isn't just about celebrating fitness," Daniel said. his eyes sweeping over the crowd, pausing deliberately. It's about celebrating strength, the kind you don't always see. Jason's stomach twisted as Daniel's gaze landed squarely on him. Sophie Reyes and Jason Miller, Daniel continued, his voice steady and clear. Would you join me up here for a moment? Jason's pulse pounded in his ears, a thousand fears crashing into him at once. He froze, wide-eyed, rooted to the floor as panic flooded his veins. The water bottle slipped slightly in his grasp, threatening to tumble from his trembling hands. Sophie's hand found his back, firm and reassuring, her touch grounding him instantly. She leaned in close, her voice low and certain. You've already done the hard part, Jason. Just keep walking forward. Jason swallowed hard, the lump in his throat almost choking him, but he nodded, trusting her more than he trusted himself. Together, they moved toward the small platform at the front of the gym, Sophie keeping her hands steady between his shoulder blades. Each step heavy with fear, but buoyed by something stronger. As they climbed onto the stage, the lights warmed their faces, and Jason blinked against the brightness, still struggling to believe he deserved to stand in that place. But Sophie's hand never left him, and for the first time in a long time, Jason didn't feel alone. The buzz of conversation faded into a heavy, expectant hush as Daniel Grant stepped to the edge of the stage. Microphone in hand, his face uncharacteristically serious. The usual easygoing smile was gone, replaced by something deeper. Something that carried the weight of what he was about to share. Jason Miller stood frozen beside Sophie Reyes, his hands clenched at his sides, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Sophie gave his back a small, steadying touch, and somehow he stayed upright. Daniel's voice, when it came, was rough around the edges, thick with a kind of emotion that didn't need dramatics to feel enormous. A few weeks ago, he began, his gaze sweeping slowly across the gathered crowd, I came into this gym undercover. I wanted to see the real heartbeat of Apex Fitness, not the equipment or the numbers, but the people, the soul of this place. He paused, drawing a slow breath, his eyes finding Sophie and Jason again before turning to the giant screen behind them. What I found, he continued, voice cracking slightly, was more powerful than I ever could have planned for. With a small nod, Daniel signaled toward the tech booth, and the lights dimmed. The giant screen flickered to life, and the hidden camera footage began to play. Jason's stomach twisted as he saw himself on screen, small and hunched, clutching his gym bag like armor. The memory rushed back with painful clarity, the weight of shame, the instinct to flee, the certainty that he didn't belong. But then, there was Sophie, her soft, patient voice cutting through the noise, her quiet presence refusing to let him vanish. The video showed her kneeling to meet his eyes. The moment she told him that strength wasn't something you wore, it was something you built. The room fell utterly silent, not a single breath loud enough to break the spell as they watched Sophie lift Jason not with her hands, but with her heart. Some in the audience wiped away tears, others simply stood motionless, transfixed by the rawness of the moment. Jason's cheeks burned with the weight of being seen, really seen. But Sophie's hand remained steady on his back, grounding him when his instincts screamed to disappear. Daniel's voice returned, softer now, but ringing clear through the reverent stillness. That, he said, pointing at the frozen frame of Sophie and Jason on the screen, is what true strength looks like. Compassion, courage, belief when someone else has none left for themselves. The truth of it settled heavy and beautiful over the crowd, cracking hearts wide open. And in that moment, Jason realized this wasn't about shame or weakness. It was about the quiet, relentless power of not giving up. As the final frame of the footage faded from the giant screen, the lights slowly rose again, casting a soft golden glow over the hushed crowd. Jason Miller stood motionless beside Sophie Reyes, his heart hammering so hard he thought everyone must hear it. Daniel Grant stepped forward once more, his voice steadier now, but rich with emotion that clung to every word. Today, Daniel said, his gaze sweeping warmly over the gathering, we don't just recognize a powerful moment. We build something out of it, something lasting. He turned first to Sophie, who stood blinking rapidly, as if holding back tears she wasn't ready to let fall. Sophie Reyes, Daniel said, his smile breaking through the seriousness. You have reminded all of us that true strength isn't about power. It's about lifting others when they can't. Lift themselves. Starting today, you are being promoted to head trainer at Apex Fitness. A ripple of gasps and scattered applause moved through the crowd, quickly building into a wave of claps and cheers. Sophie's hand flew to her mouth, stunned, and Jason saw her shoulders tremble with the force of the moment. Daniel wasn't finished. He shifted his gaze to Jason, who shrank instinctively under the weight of so many eyes. But Sophie's hand brushed his arm, steady and proud, anchoring him once again. And Jason Miller, Daniel said, his voice thick but sure, your journey is a beacon, a reminder that no matter how broken the world tries to make you feel, your strength is real, your resilience undeniable. I am proud to announce that you are the first official ambassador of our new program, Strength Inside. The cheers grew louder, heartfelt and raw, filling the space between them like a rising tide. Jason's knees threatened to buckle, but he squared his shoulders, feeling Sophie's pride radiating beside him, holding him upright. Daniel continued, passion threading every word. Strength Inside will offer free gym memberships and specialized coaching to teens who feel like they don't belong anywhere else. We will create a space where every story matters, where every battle is honored, and where real strength is built from the inside out. Tears blurred Jason's vision, but he didn't look away. Not this time. He stood tall, letting the weight of the moment sink deep into his bones. Around him, strangers clapped and cheered, not for a record broken or a medal won, but for something far rarer. For courage, for kindness, for a boy who chose to stay standing when the world tried to knock him down. The applause that filled Apex Fitness swelled into a roar, a tidal wave of sound that shook the walls and echoed into every corner of the building. Jason Miller stood at the center of it all, his chest heaving, tears streaking down his face unchecked. He didn't try to hide them this time. He didn't lower his head or shrink away. He let the emotion roll through him, let it crack him open, and pour out for everyone to see. Sophie Reyes didn't hesitate for a second. She pulled him into a fierce, unbreakable hug, her arms wrapping around him with all the pride and love of a champion claiming her greatest victory. Jason clung to her, bearing his face against her shoulder as the weight he had carried for so long finally lifted piece by piece with every cheer, every tearful smile directed his way. Around them, the crowd rose to their feet, strangers cheering as if he were family, sponsors stepping forward without hesitation, pledging support for the new Strength Inside program, offering funds, resources, time, and anything to be part of the movement being born in that very moment. Members who had once passed Jason by without a second glance now clapped him on the back, smiled through their own tears, lifting him higher with their belief. Daniel Grant stood a few steps away, his own throat tight with emotion, the microphone trembling slightly in his hand as he stepped forward again. His voice, when it came, cracked under the weight of what he felt, but he didn't care. He wanted them to hear the truth, raw and unfiltered. This, Daniel said, his hand sweeping across the gathered crowd, his eyes shining. This is what happens when we choose kindness, when we choose to see each other, really see each other, when we choose to act instead of looking away. The crowd quieted, hanging on every word, their hearts cracked wide open and ready to be filled. Strength isn't just in the weights we lift or the miles we run. It's in the battles we fight in silence. It's in the hands we extend to lift someone up. It's in the moments we dare to believe that even one small act can change everything. Jason lifted his head, his eyes locking with Daniel's across the small stretch of stage, and in that look was an unspoken promise that he would carry this forward, that he would become everything they believed he could be. The applause erupted again, louder, fiercer, a living testament to what they had all witnessed, what they had all become part of. And somewhere deep inside Jason's heart, a new kind of strength took root, unshakable, unstoppable, alive. The late afternoon sun spilled golden light across the floor of Apex Fitness, casting long, warm shadows over the rows of equipment and the polished wood of the training area. The familiar hum of treadmills and the rhythmic clinking of weights still filled the air, But there was a new sound woven into the heartbeat of the gym now: laughter. At the center of it all, Jason Miller stood surrounded by a small group of teenagers, each of them wearing the same tentative, uncertain expressions he had once known so. Well, his posture was tall now, his voice strong and steady as he demonstrated a basic lifting technique, breaking down the movements with patience and quiet encouragement. He wasn't just showing them how to build muscle, he was teaching them how to build something far more important, something that started deep inside. Sophie Reyes stood nearby, arms crossed loosely over her chest, a smile so wide it lit up her entire face as she watched Jason move through the group with a confidence that still took her breath away. Every now and then, their eyes would meet and Sophie would give him a tiny nod, a silent reminder that she had always seen this strength in him, even when he couldn't. From the office window above, Daniel Grant watched the scene unfold in quiet satisfaction, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hand, forgotten as he took in the transformation happening below. This was what he had hoped for, dreamed of, but even his wildest expectations hadn't prepared him for the beauty of it. Apex Fitness wasn't just a gym anymore. It was a sanctuary, a forge where broken pieces were melted down and remade into something stronger, brighter, unshakable. Jason knelt beside a smaller boy struggling with a dumbbell, his easy laugh filling the air as he offered a tip and a gentle nudge of encouragement. The boy grinned shyly, straightened his form, and tried again. Across the floor, another teen beamed proudly as they completed their first full set, Jason leading the applause that echoed across the mats. Daniel leaned back against the wall, his heart full, his mind replaying the words he had spoken months ago on a very different day. One act of kindness can build a whole world stronger than hate ever could. As Jason threw his head back and laughed easily with a new member, that truth shone brighter than anything else in the sunlit gym, alive and thriving in every heartbeat, every lifted spirit, every new beginning.